by and large, there has been bipartisan condemnation of Russia's pressuring of Ukraine, although attempts to enact sanctions by legislation fell short of the mark. For his views on the current situation and what should be done, we welcome now Republican Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee. He is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So, Senator, thank you so much for being back with us. First of all, just give us your sense right now of how the administration is handling this. Are they doing the right thing?
Well, it's a little bit late for my taste. I think we've been debating for some time the imposition of sanctions, David. I've been for doing this months ago, if not weeks ago, to impose binding sanctions on Russia. They need to understand America's resolve in this situation. Now we're at a point where I think we're going to see sanctions begin to unfold. Actually, Germany's taken a stronger posture than the United States at this point. But there is more that we could do, more that we should do, in terms of imposing sanctions and letting Vladimir Putin know that we mean business, whether it's imposing sanctions on timber, metals, things that will send a clear and strong message, Nord Stream 2 certainly, but also leave us room to escalate further as need be, depending on what Vladimir Putin decides to do next.
Well, and that was going to be my question about the escalation. Do you need to hold something in your back pocket? Because Vladimir Putin has not invaded the entire country, has not seized Kyiv. So do you need something in your back pocket, and how do you really moderate that? How do you calibrate it?
Well, you do need something in your back pocket, but I think the other thing that we could do right now is basically defund the war machine for Putin, because what we've done inadvertently is wage war on the oil and gas industry here in America. We should start the Keystone XL pipeline back right up. We should essentially go back into the drilling business here in America so we can supply our allies with natural gas, that we can do things that counteract what Putin has done. Instead, what we've done is wage war on the natural gas and oil industry here in America. We've increased energy prices around the globe. Vladimir Putin has been the beneficiary of this windfall. We've essentially funded the war machine that Putin is now using against Ukraine. We can take steps to deflate that right now if we will just get back in the energy business and bring back America's energy independence so that we can begin to export energy again and bring this tension down.
Senator, one of the things that I'm genuinely curious about is how do you, as a Republican with a Democratic president, act in the loyal opposition on a matter of international crisis, basically? There was a time when partisanship stopped at the border. That time is long gone now. We have a lot of differences in this country. But how do you, as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, gauge that, to say, we have to be united as a country to really stand up to Vladimir Putin? At the same time, I may have some disagreements.
Well, I think you've worded it very well, David. We're supportive of putting sanctions in place. I think President Biden is going to have to turn this chapter now. Again, I've been supportive of doing it sooner. It's been a debate about timing, but it's time to move forward in that regard. I think President Biden has put himself in a very difficult situation, though. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult for him to justify sending troops. He's also, sending a small number of troops over to support NATO to stand that up, but he's been unwilling to defend our own southern border. And it's very hard to make the argument that troops should be used to defend another nation's border. I think what he needs to be doing right now is focusing on sanctions. I agree with that as well. We will support that effort. And again, as you said, David, we need to do it in a fashion that allows us room to deal with escalation. But we should be doing that now. We should give Putin a taste of what's to come.
What sort of communication are you getting as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee from the White House, from the administration, and particularly when you mention troops? President Biden said he's not sending troops into Ukraine, but as you say, he has deployed some into Eastern Europe, and there's a possibility of more. Are you confident you will know in advance about that, have an opportunity to consult about it?
Well, we have been speaking with both Secretary Blinken and with Secretary Austin, our Secretaries of State and Secretary of Defense. I'm certain that will continue. Senator Blackburn from Tennessee and I both sent a letter to both Secretaries Blinken and to Secretary Austin yesterday, trying to get more clarity in terms of what the plan is, and we'll continue to work with them as closely as we possibly can. Again, our support is needed to make this all work. We've been willing to support, and again, I've been willing to impose sanctions on Nord Stream 2 for some time. The administration, I think, is finally coming around to that fact themselves. But again, I think we should also be going back to our own energy policies and going back to energy independence to put ourselves in a better strategic position to deal with Putin and basically be speaking from a position of strength again.
We're going to hear from President Biden in just, 24 minutes from right now. What would you like to hear from him? Obviously, sanctions in the banking financial world, in energy and export controls. What do you want to hear from him?
I certainly want to hear that. I'd like to understand how he intends to unfold the sanctions, what his plans are to let Putin know clearly that this is unacceptable, what he's doing with our allies, how he's bringing our allies into the fold, And I'd also like to know what he's going to do about our own energy independence. Again, it's the windfall that President Biden's policies have created in the energy sector that have basically funded the Putin war machine that's being deployed against Ukraine right now.
So, Senator, if I could just make a slight turn here, because you understand at Bloomberg it's terribly important what goes on at the Federal Reserve. We have 5 nominations up there right now, and they're held off for various reasons. At the same time, there's a lot going on, particularly when it comes to monetary policy, and need to have a full complement.
Yes.
You've taken particular issue with Sarah BloomRaskin, who's up for Vice Chair of Supervision, in part because of her emphasis on climate. This is my question. Are you in favor of the re-upping of the chair, Jay Powell, because he has similarly said it should be taken into account in regulating the banks, right?
Yeah, I'm in favor of, and I'm going to support Chairman Powell. But Chairman Powell has not advocated, as Sarah BloomRaskin has, from a policy perspective, that the Fed should be weaponized in the way that she has. She wants to essentially crush the oil and gas industry by debanking them. But that's not the only concern with Sarah BloomRaskin. There's a big concern about her ethics. She's been not forthcoming about that. She's not answered our senior ranking member, Senator Toomey's, questions about her involvement with Reserve Trust, and she's got some very serious issues that she's got to deal with in terms of the revolving door in Washington.
Well, I'm curious about that, because obviously there are questions that Senator Toomey, who's been on our air more than once, has raised. At the same time, we have the word out of the Kansas City Fed, which is involved in it, saying there was nothing untoward here. There was nothing out of the ordinary at all. It's perfectly typical, for example, for have communication with a board member. So why isn't that sufficient? Do you have some evidence that, in fact, something did go on that was untoward?
Well, it certainly is interesting that she said that she doesn't remember and doesn't recall on 35 different occasions when asked directly about this. She can't seem to provide us with the information to make this clear. What we do know is that 4 months after she left the administration, she goes on the board of this company, a fintech startup, that had been applied for and then been denied the master account from the Federal Reserve. Once she makes the phone call to her former colleague at the Kansas City Fed, somehow it happens. It comes through, and she takes a $1.5 million payment within a few more months. So it certainly needs more clarification, I think, and we'd like to see that. We've not received it yet. We're not ready to vote on her as a result.
Well, in fairness, I don't think she got a payment of $1.5 million, right? She was given some stock as a board member, which often happens, and she sold it for $1.5 million. I don't think it was the case that they paid her. They didn't cut her a check, right?
Actually, one of her former employees is the one that bought the stock from her. One of her former employees at the Fed bought it from the new private equity firm that he was associated with after they both left the administration. But again, a very handsome payment, $1.5 million, for a couple of years' worth of work that resulted in this Spintex startup being the only state-chartered fintech to actually have this master agreement. They market this as a big advantage. Others have applied and not gotten it. It's interesting that this is the only one. Again, this is why we need clarity.
But once again, and you know, I'm sure more about this than I do, but from what I've read, what the Kansas City Fed says is the reason that change was made in the approval was there was a change in the way that the bank did business and actually in the state banking regulations that made it possible for them to take deposits, so that there were changes in the operations of the bank. Do you think that that's wrong? The Kansas City Fed is not telling the truth?
I have not seen what the Kansas City Fed's complete reply has been, but what I'd like to see is a complete reply from Ms. Raskin, which she's failed to do at this point.
Okay, one last question, Senator, if I could. Would you be prepared to go forward with the other 4?
Absolutely.
And you would support them?
I'm not certain I'm going to support them, but I'm ready to vote on them.
I see.
Several of them I will support.
Okay, listen, this has been very helpful. Really appreciate you bearing with us here. That's Senator Bill Hagerty, Republican
Certainly, David.
of Tennessee.